Hi everyone, welcome to the first season of Behind the Screens. Today I'm speaking with someone very special, Param, who's the head of Experience Innovation Lab at Tata Digital. He's a very well-known face in the design circles. Param has been contributing towards the design community for a very long time now. In his past, he's led design and innovation for companies like Cantar, IDEO, Dr. Reddy's, Fractal Analytics, and more. That being said, please join me in welcoming Param to Behind the Screens. Param, thanks for being here today. Really appreciate it. You making time and kind of doing this for the entire design community.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me here. And it's exciting to, be part of this and have a chat about this. Thank you.
Absolutely. So, Param, I'll just quickly jump in it. But I want to start with the very basics. Your roles from everything that we've seen is a lot about design innovation more than just design. So what is innovation? You hear UX, you hear product design, you hear research, but what is innovation in design?
Sometimes I get scared by that word because it's been abused so much now that now I stopped using that word. So I think 10 years back it used to mean something, but now it's been so abused that I think it's lost its meaning. Personally, for me, in my head, I see it interchangeably used for me, right? For me, design thinking, innovation, it's the same thing. That's for me.
Yeah.
Right? Now, of course, if one wants to get really technical and one wants to split hair on it, not that I have much of it left, but I think there are differences if one definitely wants to look at it in a more nuanced way. But yeah, I just am very scared of that word now because it's just so heavily loaded now.
But if I ask you, I'll put it in a slightly more better way. If you look at product design, it's a function, or innovation is more of a vision in my head. So if someone is a product designer, I'm sure they need to have a vision. But when you're thinking of innovation, your key base becomes, just constantly thinking of the future, trying to build design practices around it.
So I would contest that, right?
Okay.
I think the way product design could be and should be practiced could also be practiced from the lens of innovation, right? Why not?
No, of course.
And I'll you've struck a raw nerve there, and I'll tell you one thing which I'm noticing of late. I see quite a few people talk, recently in the last year or two. These could be entrepreneurs, these could be product managers, these could be even design leaders for that matter. They are looking, let's say, to hire some designers, and they'll say that I'll say, what kind of person are you looking for? And their answer astounds me. Okay, then they'll say, oh, I'm looking for someone who has designed X, who has designed Y, and these X and Y are very popular apps that have succeeded in the market out there. Now, these apps are successful and very good apps. Nothing wrong with these. But I'm just astounded that their idea that this person has designed this app or that app, has worked on this app or that app, is the measure to say that, oh, I will hire only because of this. I mean, to me, this means that this person is looking at product design through that lens. And so the idea of product design has become this. So my point is, what is product design? What are you trying to do? I mean, is there a fundamental question that you're asking? What problem are you solving? I don't think we're starting with that in most cases. Most companies today unfortunately are not starting product design journey from that standpoint. They're starting from the standpoint of, okay, what UX should I do? What wireframe should I create? Or what mockup should I create? What screen should I design? That has unfortunately become the frame of reference for product design.
Yeah.
Whereas in my mind, what product design can be and should be is, what problem are you solving? Who are you solving it for? Why should someone care about it? Why should this matter? What are the unmet needs? Why should someone open this? Whether if it's an app, for example, why should someone open this app in the first place? Why should that app, even feature in their life? That app is one thing in their life. I mean, that person is going about 100 things in their life. They even spend 3 seconds in their life, thinking about this. And if so, why? So to my mind, there is no difference in my mind. Product design and innovation, why should it be different? It's the same thing.
Absolutely. And I get both of your contexts, and I've seen that. I have a question on one, and I have just an opinion on the other. The opinion one is that as a product design studio, we've seen many times companies just come to us with a certain brief where they have no clarity on, and it is just us who have to ask so many of these questions on, why are you even building this in the first place, like you just talked about, or what's the marketing strategy for it going to look like, what is the promise that you're giving to the customer, and then we can build experiences accordingly. That is just one of the thoughts. And the question is, you talked about apps, a recruiter asking that, hey, whether Param has worked on a certain app before if I want to hire him. Isn't that, I mean, it's the wrong way, I agree, but isn't that somewhere someone trying to understand whether the person has an experience in, let's say, fintech or healthcare or travel industry, whatever that industry is, that would give them a more nuanced way because they've worked for fintech in the past 5 years. I know that they'll work for me.
Yeah. So it's unfortunately the problem with the way everybody, not just designers, it's a problem with hiring across the corporate world. That people are putting putting people in boxes, and they are looking for people only in those boxes. It is a problem with hiring across the board, not just in design community, not just in any particular community. It's a problem in any discipline you take, whether it's engineering, software engineering, design, management, marketing, supply chain, R&D, anything. This is a problem or disease, I would say, in corporate world. There are very few managers who have the ability to see beyond that box, beyond these keywords in a resume, and say, and trust and look beyond that and see who that person is, or understand for a particular job description or for a particular role what is actually required, and look beyond the surface, right? I mean, look for the underlying building blocks and skills that you need. Don't look for, has that person only done this? Right? If you're, for example, I've worked in, let's say, in healthcare company for 5 years. I mean, in the recent past, I've worked for many more years in healthcare, but let's say in the recent past, I worked for a healthcare company for a few years. Now, I could have said, I will hire only people who have worked in healthcare before. But in my mind, that would have been the disservice to the initiatives that we had. Because then you're going to look at the problem only from one dimension.
Yes.
Diversity is important. Having people from different perspectives is important. Having people look at things from a different dimension is important. And if someone has some experience in healthcare, that's great.
Yeah.
Not saying that's not important, but it's to say that I will hire only from people with healthcare experience is going to be one dimensional.
Yeah. True.
Right? So to say that I will hire someone only who has worked on that kind of an app and saying that is the gold standard is a very myopic way of looking at it.
Yeah.
Rather, I would say, hey, maybe one of the criteria could be that has a person worked on a problem where they've gone from 0 to 1 in defining what a product vision could look like. Maybe that's one way of defining first principles. I mean, the underlying building blocks.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a better way of defining it.
I totally agree because, when it comes to my experience in Pineapple, the right kind of clients also for us are not the ones who are like, we disregard them to say so that I want an app just like this. These are 5 apps that I like and build something like this. Would want to be evaluated. And I'm sure that works with when you are hiring an employee in your company, a team member. So that being said,
the other point that you made, right? Sorry, the last
please.
piece. You were saying that there are clients or people who come to you and they don't know what they want. And I hear this a lot from, design community or even other folks. I think that's a good thing actually. When you start by saying we don't know what we want, we as designers should embrace that and say, wow, we don't know what we want.
That's a nice perspective. Yeah.
I don't often hear that. How many design folks out there have the ability to lean into that and say, okay, now what do we do? What questions can I ask which will allow us to frame this in a way that will make sense? it actually means that a client or a stakeholder or a business person is coming to you and is looking for help. It means that it's our job to actually handhold them to, ask some intelligent questions and to lead the way. It's actually an opportunity.
Definitely. No, I get it. I consider that as an opportunity, but I absolutely understand. Uh, but, we touched upon something innovation, right? I want to kind of
would want to add to that. It's good to know that if a client would not know what they want, but isn't it imperative for them to align with what the design team is thinking to provide certain clarity? Because sometimes what happens is that if they don't know what you want, you become too explorative, and then they might be like, no, this is not what we want. At that point of time, clarity is very important. Even though you might be asking particular questions and you might as a designer really align to that. So how do you manage that then?
It depends on the problem you're solving, right? I mean, there are two kinds of problems. There are projects where when you start the project, you have at the start of the project the outcome is not clear. Meaning the type of outcome that you're going to create is not clear at the start of the project. That's one kind of a project. For that kind of a project, the way you approach it and the how you manage ambiguity is different. There is a different kind of a project where at the beginning of the project the output will be very clear. In another kind of project, you might not know that I don't even know what I want. I just want to solve the problem. Okay, you know the problem. Okay, but you don't know what the solution could be. It may be an app. It could be an IoT device. It could be some
packaging, for example.
It could be a packaging. It could be whatever. God knows what, right? So for both of these kind of projects, you need a different approach to going through the process. I mean, the overall process might be the typical divergent convergent process, but within that, how you manage the team and how you handhold the stakeholders through that, it's like a dance. It's like a tango. You have to kind of be able to navigate that. It's a dance with ambiguity. And that's why I'm saying most design folks are uncomfortable with that ambiguity, especially with leaning into that level of ambiguity when it comes from the business, from the client side. And that discomfort with ambiguity is what throws them off. Okay? And the first thing is to actually embrace that and not look at that as something which is like, oh my God, you're losing control and you're losing, agency over your work. You start, I think that insecurity with losing control and agency over your craft is unconsciously what holds you back from embracing that ambiguity.
Yeah.
Whereas actually, if you want to solve bigger problems and want to solve these more ambiguous problems, you have to be able to get to that level of comfort. And you have to allow business to come in. You have to allow clients to come into your process as much as you have to allow yourself to go into their world and understand what the shit is going on there. So it's not easy. It's not easy. It's not comfortable. But that's why it's ambiguous.
So I'll just ask you a question on this. So
Does that answer your question?
Definitely.
So, at times being a leader,
Sorry, there's one more dimension actually, which is, an important thing is, see, most designers in design school or in their early years of design, this is another conditioning that is there, okay? The reason we are so uncomfortable with ambiguity is the core design foundation that we are taught, or whether we went to design school or not, irrespective, the underlying foundation of design education and design skill set building is in the world of tangible design. We are taught or we learn to somehow translate our work into tangible artifacts. Okay? Whether it's a whatever, a brochure, a website, an app, whether it's a whatever, something, right? Some tangible output. So we are conditioned to always measure our work and ourself, especially our work, our identity, our progress, our ability to do better through that output. Okay? So the moment there is a project which comes up where a client is saying, here is the strategic business problem which is ambiguous, we are thrown off. Because इसमें तो मतलब, I don't know how to now imagine what the outcome will be.
Mm.
And I can't imagine what the output will be.
Mm.
I'm differentiating, by the way, here between output and outcome. And very specifically,
Mm-hmm.
output is website or app or a brochure. Outcome is the client's business growth happening through sales or customer acquisition or whatever, retention or whatever it is that is happening.
Yeah,
Okay? These are two very different things.
correct.
Most design people are not able to reconcile that.
Yeah,
It's a big chasm between these two things.
yeah. And you know what? Harish just spoke about the same ideology that you have, how people are not able to understand the difference between an output and an outcome. And designers I wouldn't say all again, but many designers are always output focused.
Yep.
We have to create this app, we get done with it, but we have no clue probably about the results. But thanks, Param, on this one. But now I want to kind of dive deep into a little bit about your journey. And, you've had some very, very varied things in your life. You look at, Kantar, you look at Dr. Reddy's healthcare, you look fractal analytics, poles apart. Then you working at Tata Digital at this moment, trying to build innovative experiences. So what's that journey been like in all?
Again, I think on the surface it looks different, but I feel that what kind of has the string that connects it all for me personally. If I look at my especially the last 12 to 15 years, most of this time has been in a couple of different ideas. One, I have been trying to develop muscle in saying, how can companies become more customer centric? Fundamentally, it's been about that.
Mm.
Right? That is one thing.
Okay.
The second theme I would say is building a culture of design and customer centricity and building a capability, for the lack of a better word, in organizations, especially that didn't have this before. That is another kind of thing which is somewhere unconsciously been part of my journey. I haven't looked for that. I haven't sort of consciously said I will go only where organizations didn't have that before, but somewhere that has ended up being my thing. So
Let's say, let's put two parts to this, right? I won't talk a lot about all the other companies, but two very intriguing things. One is Dr. Reddy's Studio 5B. The second is Fractal Analytics. Right now, my focus is, let's say we just talk about Dr. Reddy's. You built a team from scratch. You designed experiences that eventually help patients, caregivers. What was that journey like? And since we are on the path of your journey, why Dr. Reddy's? Why not some other organization?
So the journey began when I was at IDEO. Dr. Reddy's was actually a client of ours, and that's how we began the relationship. And I was lucky enough to kind of start working with Dr. Reddy's from that time. The very first project that we worked on, that IDEO did for Dr. Reddy's, was helping Dr. Reddy's rethink its organizational purpose. So that is the first kind of engagement, and it was all about helping Dr. Reddy's reconnect to kind of one to rethink its organizational purpose, but also to kind of think about what does the future look like in terms of where articulating the customer centricity in the DNA of the company, which has always been there in how the founder had thought about it from 35, 40 years back, articulating it in a way that could be future centric. And so there were a lot of intents behind it. But that one project was the foundation. The culmination of that was this idea of good health can't wait, right? And so good health talks about saying Dr. Reddy's is in this business because it's about patients. It's like saying we are in the business of making medicines for patients getting better. So that's good health. Can't wait talks about how can we solve problems in healthcare in a way that have never been solved before. It's about bringing in that urgency, saying, can we think about innovation without using the word innovation, right? So that's why can't wait. So it's good health can't wait. Very simple, very, very, very kind of action oriented in that sense. Makes you sort of sit up and say, wow, it's bringing that core values of empathy and dynamism into this phrase. So that was the first kind of project that we did, that IDEO did for Dr. Reddy's, and that became the foundation. And the whole philosophy was, it's not enough to have a purpose statement and have that on a poster on a wall. That's not going to help. It is about saying, how do you live that? How do you translate that into action? And the whole purpose of coming up with a purpose statement was, how can this become the start of a cultural transformation, and how can this become the genesis of a transformation towards patient centricity across the company? That was the reason for coming up with a new purpose statement. It was not about saying, let's come up with a new purpose statement for the heck of it, right? And so that started a journey of many years. In fact, I think collectively for me, it was about 7 or 8 years. And so we did a series of projects after that, initially when I was at IDEO, and then after that, I continued once I came on board with Dr. Reddy's full time. And so it was all about translating Good Health Can't Wait into various every different touch point in every different part of the organization, into saying, how can this be experienced by various stakeholders of the company? Because you don't have to say Good Health Can't Wait. It has to be experienced. Whether it's patients, whether it's, their customers, their employees, their, stakeholders, anyone. That was the whole premise behind it. So that's how we went about it systematically. And when IDEO moved out of India soon after that, about a couple of years or whatever after that, I got an opportunity to, the chairman of Dr. Reddy's, Prasad, wanted to take that work forward. And, he said, how about we start an internal innovation lab? And, given his vision for what this was about and his conviction, and he had seen the value of design and design thinking and what it was doing to the company, I thought this was a fantastic opportunity. I mean, for a chairman of a multi-billion-dollar company which is present in 20 countries with 20,000 employees in healthcare, to be saying that I want to use design and transform the company and to make it more patient-centric and to give a blank canvas was a lifetime opportunity. So it was just, it's just a big privilege, frankly. So I came on board, and then we started what eventually got called Studio 5B, the innovation lab. And that was the whole starting point. And that is in 2014 when I came on board in Dr. Reddy's. And I was there for about 5 years. The studio is still continuing and, thriving. And so, that was a journey. Yeah.
I think that's a beautiful way, when you especially say that the chairman of a multi-billion-dollar company really thinking and really trying to put design first somewhere, whatever that form of design is, or patient centricity, user centricity first. That's exceptional. And especially, I believe right now a lot of people are doing it, but I would say probably 6 to 8 years back, that was not a thought that was quite prevalent, right? But you touched upon something that, before we even did all this, when we were talking, you showed me just a small strip of a medicine where you talked about how user centricity needed to be in every touch point, and that was probably one of the very small steps that you have taken in that 5-year journey. That's something I want to probably show when we kind of put this podcast on. But are there any other projects that you worked at Studio 5B that actually achieved impact or had maybe not, if not the groundbreaking moment, something very powerful for patients, for caregivers, or anyone in the healthcare circle?
For me, one of the most important stories in that is how we, in the early days, we would take many of the colleagues from our business on journeys when we would do research with patients and customers. We would take them along with us for fieldwork and visit patients' homes. And to me, that is one of the most eye-opening moments for many of these business stakeholders. To the extent that these, and many of them were, very senior execs, right? I'm not kidding you. In many cases, these execs would remember the names of those patients even 3 to 4 years, 4 to 5 years later. That is the extent to which those memories and those incidents had an impact on their life. And they remembered it for years together after that. They would always talk about it and say, wow, that was a defining moment for them. So that's one example of an impact, right?
Yeah.
From of course, projects wise, there's lots that we that we worked on over the years. There were some that were very, very out there in terms of ambiguity and call it moonshot projects. And there were some which were more closer to kind of, incremental sort of stuff. The one that you mentioned was something that we were very keen on. Saying good health can't wait, how do you translate that into a touch point? One of the touch points that we picked was, let's say, packaging. And packaging, we said, was, think about it, right? As a medicine company, packaging is one of the first touch points and one of the most important touch points for a patient. It is probably the most overlapping touch point between the medicine manufacturer and the patient.
Yeah, of course.
Right? And that is where the patient experiences the product before they actually consume it. And what we said is, it's not about making the packaging look pretty. It's not about just changing the look and feel of it or whatever, right? It's not about the aesthetics of it alone. That was not the point of it. The point of it was, we said the objective is, how do we make the medicine, how do we improve the adherence of the medicine? In the sense, can a lot of patients don't remember to take their medicines on time. Can we aid in that? Can we improve that? What are the other unmet needs in terms of when patients have their medicines? Can we improve that? Can we help in their experience of having the medicines and make it easier for them to have their medicines? So those were the kind of questions that we wanted to answer through this, and that is what we wanted to solve with the overall idea of good health can't wait. So when we did that, we went and of course did a lot of ethnography and research and understanding how patients are engaging with their medicines. Anyway, one of the things that we found, many things, but one of the things that I remember is, when a patient picks up a medicine strip, the three things that they look for immediately when you pick up a medicine is the name of the medicine, the expiry date, the manufacturing date, the dosage. These are the 3 or 4 things that they look for immediately when you pick it up. And they want to be able to read it without having to squint or look at it, or like having to pick up their glasses if they're slightly older or need to read with a pair of specs. And most medicines don't have that information easily, readable.
Yeah, you see that, like, it's on the package. It's like when you punch your medicines out, it's gone.
It's gone. And so we said, think about it. If this were a consumer product, something as simple as that would be, solved for, right? But in the medicine and the pharma industry, this has been there for many, many decades and it hadn't been solved for. At least not to our knowledge. So that was one of the needs that we identified, and such an important one that, how can you solve for that barrier in the process of having your medicines? Especially imagine, if you end up taking the wrong medicine, or if there are a bunch of medicines in a box, and we saw that in many houses, there are multiple people in the house and there's one medicine box where you put all the medicines in one. And patients use a lot of workarounds. They'll write the name of the patient on the with a sketch pen or a marker or whatever, and they resort to all that because this is a problem,
Hmm.
right?
My mother used to actually do that. She used to write just the
Exactly.
manufacturing date because that medicine was not something that you have constantly.
Exactly. And they don't need to do that, right? I mean, I'm saying these are workarounds that people use, but ideally you shouldn't have to do that. So the way we solved it is by designing two stubs at the top and at the bottom of each strip, where the name and the expiry date and the manufacturing date would be quickly visible, and it would not get eroded as soon as if you punched out the tablets, and that would be easily visible the moment you picked up the medicine. Again, it's not rocket science. It's not correct. The whole point is, like you said in the beginning, we were talking about innovation. Innovation doesn't have to be some rocket science kind of, Mars, going to Mars kind of stuff alone. That's one kind of innovation. But this kind of innovation is also needed, which is like saying the tiny little things.
Simplicity in innovation.
Tiny little things.
Yeah.
What is the unmet need for the patient, the customer, the user? Can you solve for that one little thing that is obvious, that is right under your nose, that hasn't been done for decades? And it's still hard to do, by the way. It's not even to do that, it took us a lot of effort. So that's one example. I still feel very proud of that because it is about solving that little pain point, the little unmet need, and doing the right thing. More than anything else, it's doing the right thing for the end user. That makes me feel good about it. I mean, that's one project, but like that, we did many others. Yeah.
So a question that comes out of this is that, you're a leader now, but you are a researcher at heart. From everything that I've known about you, you understand research in depth. You love doing it. You build products doing it.
I find these terms very scary because these are all boxes that we put ourselves into. Leader, researcher, designer, whatever, right? So,
But what I mean to say is that, forget the leadership part. You love doing research is what I'd like to put it as. Is that
research is required and is a stepping stone to
correct?
To arrive at the outcomes or the solutions that we are trying to solve. Yes.
So
I think what is more important for me is building empathy. Most people forget that. They get caught up in the research, they forget about building empathy.
since we are at it collides with the other question that I also have is, how does someone in an organization who's just entering the organization, is fairly new to the design industry, fairly new to the product design industry research, per se, convince someone, their manager or their manager's manager, to conduct research? And how do you convince them? Because at times there are companies who just want to build products, ship products, not all, but many, based on their intuition and whatever. How does someone at this stage convince someone of their manager to kind of take that research decision?
I would say don't try to convince people. Go out there, go and meet people. Go and meet the users. Doesn't have to be 20, 30, 40. Go and meet 3 people. Bring stories back. With those 3 stories, 5 stories, 10 stories, whatever, look at what came out of that, what insights came out of that, what powerful stories came out of that which could help you reframe the problem. Is there one insight that came out of it which would make the stakeholder fundamentally rethink the product? Which would fundamentally shake the ground on which the product is standing, which would question the assumptions? You just need one insight or one reframe. I'll give you an example. We were doing a project on smoking cessation, and the whole project was about how do we help people, how do we support smokers in the journey of quitting. That's how we started the project. And smoking is one of the hardest habits to quit. It's the most difficult habit to quit, and after you've quit also, there's no guarantee that you're going to stay quit. There are a lot of people who come back and into the habit. And when we began the project, we said we don't know what the product in the sense of a solution that we might create. It could be anything. It could be whatever.
Yeah.
It could be any healthcare solution that we might create. when we did the whole detailed research, the ethnography, the journeys and everything, one of the big insights that we got was not every smoker is looking to quit, but every smoker is looking to reduce. And in fact, every smoker is looking to take control. So we started the whole thing saying quit, 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 quit. But we saw suddenly a huge opportunity saying reduction.
Reduce.
And guess what? That's a huge and much bigger opportunity. It's just a small little reframe, but just look at the just massive twist, right? And when you look at it from a user standpoint, it's a huge shift. It can drive adoption in a significant way. Now you could not have got that insight unless you actually got into the shoes of the people that you're trying to solve for. So I don't think there's any the convincing thing, in my opinion, is for that project, for that problem that you're trying to solve, don't theorize. Just go out there, do some quick research, whatever little time that you might have, build some stories, build some quick hypothesis, build some quick insight. One insight, it doesn't have to be 20. Take one big powerful insight, one powerful hypothesis, one powerful reframe, and go with that. That's more important.
So, Param, a question that comes to me is that typically when you are in an organization, you want to use data-driven design, data-driven insights to build the right products. And it could be any data. It could be qualitative or quantitative in this case. But sometimes there is, intuition. Sometimes there's more creativity that goes away from those principles of always adhering to that. How does someone, who's confident about their intuition, convince someone else to kind of use it, or they themselves use it? What happens in such cases? How do you maneuver around a situation like this?
I mean, it's a tough one. I mean, so I'll answer that in a couple of ways, right? So one is, whenever I've tried to explain what design at a very simple level is, or what design thinking is for a new person is, for a person who's not familiar with design thinking is, I talk about it in 4 building blocks. One of those building blocks is using the abductive thinking principle. What is abductive thinking? I mean, it's a very complicated term, which Roger Martin came up with. But what it means is, at a very simple level, if you forget the jargon, what it means is basically saying, what if? And it's a very powerful concept. Abductive thinking is basically saying, imagining what could be possible without coming from any frame of reference to current reality. There is absolutely no frame of reference to current reality, and it is different from inductive and deductive thinking. We are all trained, and our education system, traditional education system, is completely based, very heavily leaning towards inductive and deductive thinking. It's all about problem solving with current logic, evidence from the past, evidence from current observable facts, and then you try to come up with an answer. And you need that. I mean, it's not to say that is wrong or bad, right? You also need abductive thinking. Abductive thinking is saying, what if? And as children, we all were natural at what if. It was something that we had as a muscle born with us. We were very good at it. It was probably our strongest muscle. As we became adults, we got adulterated and we lost that muscle.
What do you mean when you say as children we were good at a what if?
We were naturally good at it. We didn't have to be taught how to think what if. Like, I mean, if you look at any child, the younger they are, especially, they are better at it. They will be like, they don't have any limitations or constraints. They'll say, what if I can be an astronaut tomorrow? What if this, what if this house could be a ship tomorrow? They are naturally thinking about what if. Without constraints, without like any concept of, whether anything is done before, whether it's possible tomorrow. They're not thinking about all of that. They're just exploring what if.
Yeah.
They have curiosity, they have magic, they have wonder. adults start getting constrained and becoming beaten up into thinking about, oh, this is not possible because. And I say this to a lot of people that, the moment we start thinking, what if, the first thing that comes up as a resistance to that is, oh, this is not possible because. And there will be 10 reasons why it's not possible. Those 10 reasons that someone listed down as why it's not possible is very easy to come up with those 10 things. It requires zero cognitive effort. Zero cognitive effort. I don't have to sit and even like apply my brain. Anyone can come up with those 10 things. It's based on that inductive and deductive logic. Okay? My counter question would be, what does it take to make it work? Tell me, put in cognitive effort to thinking about. Now tell me, what are the things that we should do to make that idea actually work? Let's think and put energy into that. Why it will not work is something that anyone can think of. What it will take to make it work is where it takes effort. It takes ingenuity. It takes creativity. It takes a lot of thinking about feasibility and viability in a different way, not in a traditional way. The best ideas in the world that have succeeded have required someone to think about feasibility and viability in a different way, not in a traditional way. And that happened because someone said, what if? And someone also said, I will not stop with what if. I will also solve the feasibility and viability in a different way and not get stopped with the constraints of feasibility and viability. I will solve that also with creativity. So I mean, coming back to your point, you need that ability to build that abductive thinking muscle. You need that ability to have that what if thinking. You need that ability to say, hey, I need inductive and deductive thinking. I also need abductive thinking.
This exact conversation I had with someone yesterday, where he gave me an example of, very simple example. If Elon Musk had never said, what if we can go to Mars? He had not thought of, how I'm going to build my ship. How is it that I'm going to, do everything around it? The question was, how can I go to Mars? What if we can go to Mars?
Yeah.
And then we figure out how things work around that, right? It's an extremely simple contextual example. I want to go back a little bit, Param, in your journey at fractal analytics. The reason why I want to go there is you talk a lot about behavioral science over there. What is behavioral science in its probably the layman's terms? And why did he use that in fractal analytics? Was it only limited to fractal analytics, or is it something that you generally use it across organizations or wherever you work in?
My entry into fractal coincided with fractal acquiring a company called Final Mile. Final Mile is is been around for about probably 15 years now, or maybe slightly more. But my entry into fractal happened coincidentally at a time when fractal had just acquired Final Mile. And Final Mile is one of the companies that pioneered in India and also some many other parts of the world, but was one of the early companies that started experimenting and exploring different methodologies using behavioral science. Using behavioral science, they started looking at problem solving, and they succeeded phenomenally on doing that with some very complex problems, like how do you prevent people from crossing the railway tracks, in a city like Bombay where there's so many people and so on, right? And how do you make people change their behavior in these kind of complex situations where you can't just tell them that it's unsafe or it's bad for you, or I mean, people already know that. It's not that they're going to stop doing that. That's not going to help. So my timing of joining Fractal coincided with that, and I had the good fortune of integrating a lot of the folks from the erstwhile Final Mile team into my team that I built after that. So we built a cohesive design and behavioral science team after that, and over the course of 3 years while I was there, we built that team further. And through that I got to learn a lot in that journey, and that is the first time I was learning behavioral science as well. So Before that, I've been a design ethnographer and user researcher in some over the years. And essentially, if I had to kind of put it in a simple way, these are both as an outcome, they are looking at the same thing, which is answering fundamentally a few questions. One is, why do people do what they do? What are the underlying reasons for people's motivations and needs, why people are doing what they're doing? It's trying to get into that underlying issues behind behaviors and motivations, right? The second part of it is talking about how do you now also influence or motivate people to do a new behavior, a change in the action, a desired action. Like I said, if people are crossing railway tracks and they should not be crossing railway tracks because it's unsafe for them, how do you actually change that behavior or influence that behavior? And so that's the second part of it, which is extremely difficult in some situations. So behavioral science is a very relatively new emerging field, a very exciting one, and is coming at it with a lot of influence from various different disciplines. There's psychology, there's neuroscience, there is behavioral economics. There's all these different sort of fields that have kind of influenced it and sort of giving inputs into it and driving it. And again, depending on which practitioner you talk to within applied behavioral science, they may have been influenced by or might be practicing or using methods from any of these different fields. But that's kind of what it is. Yeah.
So, am I wrong to say that, or am I right? There is a lot of overlap between user research and behavioral science, or is that wrong?
That's what I'm saying. There, at an output level, I mean, at an intent level, there's a lot of overlap. At the methodological level, when you start getting into the house, you will see some differences. You will see certain ideological differences also, and there'll be some overlaps also. So, there is overlap and there is distinction also. Yes.
Got it. So, a question that I have is about emerging technologies. How do you make a decision in such a case where, if you might not have the full knowledge, like you said, of a certain thing and your team member knows it much better? How do you make a decision whether it's, or to innovate on top of that? If I give you an idea of something that I understand is a new technology to integrate in a product, and if, let's say, you might not know about it, then it'll be difficult for you to assess whether what I'm saying is right or wrong, or is that wrong?
Why should I take that decision?
Okay.
Can that decision be precipitated on a group, like the team rallying around a user or a customer or on a set of insights or on a set of needs or on a set of voice of the customer, and let that core team, see what is the right thing to do, right? One of my ex-bosses, he used to say this very wise man. He said this beautifully. He said, and he's a CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company. He used to often say this to me. He said, people come to him with a lot of questions, or when they are in meetings with him, and he would say that his challenge was that people often look to him for a certain thing, and then whatever he says is misinterpreted as a decision, whereas it's actually an opinion. But because he's the CEO and because he's the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company or whatever, he's looked at it in a certain way.
Yeah.
It's considered a decision and it's not taken as an opinion. So, I mean, I'm not saying I'm him, but
Yeah, correct.
the point is that I think of myself also as someone who's just incorporating an opinion into that process.
So, Param, in the next set of questions, I want to understand your thoughts for everyone who's newly entered the industry or has only 1 to 2 years of experience in the industry. So a lot of these questions are going to be around that now. Many times there are designers who kind of are in a rut, are boxed in thoughts, are constantly creating something but are just stuck there. How do you suggest breaking free from this block and finding fresh inspiration? How would you find inspiration, or how should someone approach that part?
Get out of the office.
I'm working from home. Get out of your home.
Get out of your home. So one, meet your customers, meet your end users. One of the things that I struggle with, and particularly in India, is the number of designers that are designing without meeting their end users. So two things here, and there's a paradox here. One is the number of designers who are not in touch with their end users is one thing. At the same time, there is also this paradox that there are many designers who think that research is talking to users. I want to demystify that. Okay, research is not just talking to users. Okay, meaning there are so many, and especially you see this in portfolios. Okay, when you're interviewing or meeting candidates for hiring, you'll see portfolios of people showing that I have done research, and all you'll see in that is they've spoken to a few users, and that's all there is to it. There is really no insight there. There is really no rigor in what happened in terms of what went behind the scenes in terms of thinking about the problem, framing it, synthesizing it, or conceptualizing, or unpacking what happened. How did they actually understand the problem? How do they build empathy? And how do they make sense out of it? Right?
Sorry to cut you, but just a question on this: isn't it difficult for them at that stage to understand how problems can be formed, statements can be framed,
Yeah.
synthesis can be done?
Again, that's why I'm saying it's a bit of a paradox. I'm just saying that not every designer needs to necessarily be a deep researcher.
Correct.
Right? But I'm saying at the very least, so if you decide to get into research, then go deep, is my point.
Absolutely.
But if you're a designer who wants to not be a specialist researcher, then appreciate that research is not talking to users. But I think every designer should go and build empathy, a minimum amount of empathy, by definitely spending some time with users. That's why I said it's a bit of a paradox.
Correct.
Yeah.
How important is it for an organization's mindset to be in the right space to let their designers go out and empathize with their users?
Yeah, like what Dishti is saying, a lot of organizations might not give you the opportunity.
I mean, in my experience, that may be true, but honestly, I think the barrier is more in our heads than in the organizations coming in the way of us not doing it. There are very few organizations that will come and say, don't go and do this. I will not allow you to go out there and do this. In IDEO, one of the values of IDEO was ask for forgiveness, not permission. And so there are some things that you don't need to wait for a certain approval for. I'm not saying you should go out there and rob a bank or whatever, right? I mean, that's not what we're talking about. But going and meeting an end user and collecting some insights from that, I don't see why anybody in their right mind would say that, oh, you did something wrong. And unfortunately, what ends up happening is we are sitting and waiting for permission, and we want some approval before we go ahead and do that. And I don't get it. I think there are so many things that we can do without having to wait for that permission. Go out there, just get out. Go out there, do a little bit. I'm not saying do a lot. Do a little bit. Use it as a proof of concept to build some level of interest. Show it to some people, rally some people around it, right? Something. I'm not saying a lot. If that doesn't work, then try something else. But my worry is that people get stopped with this question saying, oh, but organization may not allow. How do you know? I mean, there may be one or two organizations that are like that, but 9 out of 10 times or 8 out of 10 times, I can pretty much say from my experience that that's not the case.
Got it. I think I give you a couple of org names, but I'm just joking. But
so coming back to your question, right? You asked about how can
someone get out?
One is that whole point about getting out, meeting real people. That is one big thing about getting inspired. Second, how you frame the problem, right? What problem are you solving? I think that is a huge part of how you get inspired. What problem are you solving? It's a fundamental, simple, frame of reference. And that one question will give a lot of clarity about how you think about and how you get inspired. Like if I ask a person, what project are you working on? How they frame that answer itself will tell me about how inspired they are.
So if I tell you that, you ask me a question,
Yeah.
that what project are you working on? And I tell you, I'm working on a healthcare app
Yeah.
that, helps people achieve, more customer centricity and get medicines easily. Let's take an example.
Correct.
Now, what do you gauge out of an answer like this, and what is the right thing?
Yeah. So again, there's nothing right or wrong about the answer. My point is there are so many different ways of reframing that question, that statement. When I'm working on that problem, can I diverge that a little more? Can I, or if I had to converge that a little more, how does that lens change? How does that make me change the way I think about the solutions or think about the way I, identify? I mean, it just inspires, it broadens my mind.
Yeah.
Like for example, just since you gave this example, right? I would add to that as an analogy, and since I've thought about this question, it's easier for me to rally off of this, right? If a pizza can be delivered in 30 minutes, why can't a medicine be delivered in 30 minutes?
Correct.
That would be another way of framing the same thing. Now, can that statement be the fundamental framing? It's achieving the same objective, maybe, but does that inspire me more?
Yeah.
Maybe it doesn't. I don't know. But I'm just saying,
Correct.
how does that make me think differently? So that's the second one, which is about how you frame the problem. The third one is analogous inspiration, right? Which is, are you looking outside of your industry or context of problem solving in other industries, in other contexts?
Yeah. That's a good.
Completely different, unconnected. And this is a very simple one, but a very, very powerful one. Like you might be working in healthcare, but are you looking at, let's say, completely unconnected, let's say,
Payments.
maybe, are you going to the Kirana shop guy and spending some time there and looking at the way he manages his business? Maybe there is some inspiration there. Or are you looking, maybe, going and spending some time in a fish market and seeing the way, the supply chain happens and how fish is delivered there? Is there something that can be learned over there?
Yeah.
Right?
This definitely helps you break that rut.
Completely. I mean, you might get nothing out of it, but if there is one thing that gets in, that you can pick up from there, then it can change the way you think about it. That's inspiration.
Yeah.
The fourth one is bring business stakeholders into your process. Get into their shoes, understand the business more, understand how money moves through this business ecosystem in that problem context. If the more you understand that, the more you will be able to understand the problem better, and the more that can inspire your design solutions.
Yeah.
So these are four things. I mean, these are just top of the mind.
No, that's I get it. I at least, especially your last 2 points where you're like, I've done that in the past, where sometimes even it's not a different context, but sometimes even talking to a family member, not about the problem, but somewhere just talking about that experience helps you completely change the game. Sometimes calling your friend changes the game.
Exactly.
So it could be anything, but I absolutely get you.
Yeah.
So, obviously, Param, you've interviewed so many people in your past, people in your early stages, and, people with who are in the early stages of their career. There are these set of common problems sometimes that exist in many. There is this one problem that typically would exist in many. What are those problems that you see from your end that when it comes to them, and how does someone solve for that?
So when I look at folks in the early stages of their career, right, design community, I guess they are struggling with a few things, right? They are looking for, I think they are struggling with reconciling a lot of things. One is they've just come out of the academic world. They are trying to make sense out of this world of industry and this world of business, this world of the real world. And having learned design either in a real, in a formal context or on their own, they are now trying to apply it in the real world context. And that reconciliation is what is going on in the first 1 year, 2 years. And that, I think, is for some people a shock. For some people, it's a kind of a adjustment process. For some people, it's actually a rude shock. They recoil and then they come back and so on, right? I think that's one challenge that I see with them. The second is there are so many inputs that they are getting at that time, and so much advice and so much of, stimulus, so much of inputs, advice informally and formally that they're getting from so many different people that it confuses the heck out of them, right? And as a result, they are probably like struggling to figure out what's the right thing to do, right? They look at their peers and say, oh, this person is earning so much. Oh, this person's got that job. Oh, this person's got this much money. Like money is, for example, one of the big things, right? Like, how do you know how much should be the right salary? It's one of the biggest decision points of their careers. Is one of the most important, which is true for anyone in any part of their career in general, but especially in the early stages of your career, you don't have your own internal compass. You don't have your own internal ability to judge money, except for figuring out what your peers and what your batchmates are earning. That's your only metric, or your seniors.
Correct.
Once you grow older and once you figure out after 5, 10, 15 years of experience, you have your own yardstick to some extent.
Correct.
But in the beginning, you're relying completely on your batchmates and your seniors. And that's a very big, in my opinion, that's a big handicap. And that's almost like saying that you're making life decisions based on a sample size of whatever, some 5 or 10 people who are in your inner circle. I mean, that is complete rubbish. I mean, what if you're hanging out with the wrong people, or if you're influenced by the wrong people, then you're going to end up making the wrong choices. And I've seen that with many people. That they are deciding to work in a company because of money. Right? So money is one big thing that they struggle with, which is, because there's so much peer pressure and, guilt around that, and, oh, I have to live up to a certain expectation or an image or whatever. And of course, family pressure and whatnot. The third thing is, this idea of progress, right? Everyone wants to see progress. Everyone wants to feel accomplished. Everyone wants to feel like they are making it. One is, of course, you found the job that you wanted to get after you graduated. And again, there could be two categories there. One is you found the ideal job after you graduated. Two is you didn't find an ideal job, but you found something to make do with, and then you are seeing that as a stepping stone to get to somewhere more ideal. So then this person is in that mode of, either proving it in this so-called ideal job and kind of, trying to notch the brownie points to stay there on that treadmill. Or in the second latter case, it's like saying, okay, now how do I up my game so that I can get to the ideal job which I wanted or want, so that I can move to the next level. So they want progress, basically. They want to get to that level of accomplishment. And for that, they want feedback. They're not asking for it, but I'm saying they're looking for that help. They're looking for that input, which will say, am I doing okay? Is my skills okay? Is my work getting better? Unfortunately, they ask the wrong questions because they don't know better. They'll say, I want to add this to my portfolio. मुझे portfolio बनाना है, right? They will say those kind of things without realizing that what they're actually looking for is something else. If they get the right mentors, then of course, then they're lucky, or the guides or whatever. But if they don't, then they'll end up barking up the wrong tree. So I don't know. These are some of the top of the mind challenges, but yeah, this is what I've seen.
That was amazing. Amazing answer, okay, to a very deep question that a lot of design leaders struggle to explain.
So, Param, one thing that you pointed out, and I want to dive deeper in all these 3 points that you mentioned, that the first challenge that you see younger people in their careers having is that they listen to too many people, too many advices, and the world is giving them. Now, the question is very bluntly that how should a person decide whether if I want to listen to Param, if I want to listen to Rohan, if I want to listen to someone else? How do they make that decision in such a case?
I mean, I think it's about who you resonate with. If it's there's no right answer. I mean, it's about who you resonate with. There is no right person or wrong person. It's about for each person there is a certain vibe, there is a certain chemistry, there is a certain resonance that you look for. If you look up to a certain person, or if you, it may not be a role model, but even at a peer level, there is a certain vibe that you have, certain, like, yes, I can, the value system aligns, that this person, is aligned to my way of thinking, my way of, he speaks my language, there is a certain,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying,
The
right?
comfort.
There's a feel that,
the vibe, yeah.
that you're getting me and I get you. I think that feeling of I get you and you get me, I think that is what should be there. And if that is there, then not to say that you should then do everything that person is asking you to do, but listen to it, absorb it, reflect on it, and then do whatever it is that makes you feel that is the right thing to do. There is no right answer. In fact, you still might look up to that person and might still do the opposite of what that person is asking you to do, and that's okay. But that's how it works. Because every person's journey is very contextual. There is no right journey or right decision. Every person's journey is very, very unique. Very, very unique. What worked for me may not necessarily work for you.
Correct.
Because my journey was different. My journey was set in a certain context.
In my time, I've met a lot of designers who aren't confident enough. If my manager tells me this, I have to do this. I have my opinion, but I don't know how to say that out loud. How can, obviously, how can someone take that a notch up and say that, this is not what I feel is correct? At least give their opinion. It might be wrong, but give their opinion confidently.
A lot of confidence has to do with there are two things to it, right? One is competence, two is self-belief. Competence has to do with your ability, the technical chops, right? Do you have the technical knowledge in whatever it is that you're dealing with? So you should know what you're talking about. If you know what you're talking about to some extent, then you have, and you have that, and doesn't mean you have to be a, master already and then only you should speak. I don't mean that. But whatever minimum knowledge that is required for that topic at that time, you know that much. And it might be even a question that you're using, that you're framing. And that question is important, right?
Yeah.
Then comes the self-belief. So the self-belief is, I think, where many people struggle with. And dare I say, I would say, unfortunately, a lot of women struggle with it. And I don't know why. I can't, at least I don't have an answer to it very clearly. But even men struggle with it. I'm not saying they don't, but I'm just saying it seems like there are more women that struggle with self-belief than men, unfortunately. That's just the world that I think we live in. So now how do you deal with it? I think there is no one magic pill. I think it's about dealing with a lot of things. I think one has to scratch the surface. I like, one of the things that I talk about at a much deeper level is looking at things like relationship with authority, for example. This is a much, much deeper conversation, which almost goes into the realm of therapy even. But it is important, and I bring this up with a lot of design folks, especially because a lot of designers have gotten into the world of design through rebellion. Okay? Because design is an alternate profession. It is not a mainstream profession. And many designers have chosen this as an alternative, as an act of rebellion in their teenage years. Okay? And that was because they were rebelling against authority. Unconsciously.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that was a conscious thing.
Correct.
Now, the resulting impact of that down the line is that there is something unresolved with authority which is still not resolved. And so your inability to speak up against authority, when you have some deep thoughts inside you which are actually making sense, but you struggle to speak up in front of authority, or you're not able to, or you speak up but you speak up in a way that is ineffective, you become aggressive. Both are equally bad. You're going from one extreme to the other, right? Either you don't speak at all, or you speak too much, or you get aggressive. Both are equally wrong.
Correct.
Is because of the relationship with authority that is flawed. Now, this, for example, is something that is important to reflect on and look at, because you have to address it at the root cause. There's no point, avoiding that.
So, Param, one final question for a longer answer, and then I have a series of short, quick answers that I need from you. Right. So, a lot of times, what happens is that young designers aren't able to clearly measure the success, the impact of designs, the products, whatever they've brought to the table. How does someone in the early stages, not highly fundamental, but someone in the early stages do that at least to a smaller extent as for you?
So I think this idea of measuring impact is, first of all, so I think it is important. Okay, measuring impact is important, but I think it's also overstated. Okay,
Okay.
or rather, it's misunderstood.
All right.
And I'll tell you why. In the world of business, and as I've seen and become more closely acquainted with the world of business, the business stakeholders in the last, especially 10 years, I've worked up close with folks from marketing, from HR, from supply chain or R&D, and all the different other functions of an organization beyond design. Right. One of the things that struck me is that almost every function in the organization struggles with measuring impact.
Correct. So it's overstated in the world of design.
Yes. So even engineering, take any function in the organization, there is probably hardly any function in the organization that does not struggle to measure its impact, B, to justify it. So the so-called concept of ROI is not something that is only unique to design or any other one function. Even data science. I worked in Fractal for 3 years, and I got very acquainted with the world of analytics in data science. And I was fascinated to learn that data scientists struggle to, talk about to be able to measure ROI and to be able to show the value of analytics in their organizations. And one would think that you're talking about data, and a large part of that is quantitative data, and it is measurable, and it is, it's tangible. But you still are struggling with it. But that's the reality of it, because it's complex. It's not because you don't want to or because you can't, but it's complex. It's hard to draw. Correlation is easy, but causation is not that easy.
Yeah.
Right? So that's the point, which is that even HR, for example, HR departments struggle to be able to show the impact of their work in most organizations. Marketing is probably one of the functions in many organizations where it's relatively easier to say, I did this and therefore this is the impact of that. Or sales, actually. Sales is probably the one.
Engineering.
Yeah.
Right. Isn't it easier in engineering that load times, whatever?
Certain parameters maybe yes. Certain things yes, but not all. That's my point, which is that this idea of impact is overstated. Or not overstated, it's overemphasized, or we put too much pressure on ourselves to think that only we are struggling to to measure it. No, we're not. We're not the only ones. Everyone is struggling. And that doesn't mean we should, take our gas, foot off the pedal. But I'm just saying that take it in context. Take it in, have a larger picture in mind, that we have to find the right way of measuring impact. We shouldn't get all psyched about it and measure the wrong things.
What would the right things?
It depends on the organization, right? If for that organization, we have to figure out what is value. We have to figure out what is relevant in that context, and see what does the customers of that organization care about, what does the business stakeholders of that organization care about, and then figure out what are the right metrics, the leading indicators or the lagging indicators that make sense directly or indirectly. Like if it's a company that is in healthcare, then for example, one of the things could be that how many patients are you able to engage with in a certain period of time. Earlier, how many were you engaging with? Now, how many are you engaging with directly? Right? Earlier, you may have been going through a doctor or through a distributor or someone else. Now, how many are you having a direct interface with? That's one example of impact. Whatever, right? I mean, so there could be so many different ways of measuring impact.
Got it. So, Param, quick questions now. These questions extremely
Rapid fire round.
no. I just
Will I get a hamper?
the way you hate innovation, the word innovation. I don't like the word rapid fire.
Okay.
Quick questions.
But as long as I get a hamper, I'm fine.
Yeah, it depends. If you perform well, you will get.
Okay.
All right. So, the first question: you are a photographer. You
Not.
okay?
I'm a hobbyist.
Okay, correct. So, hobbyist, photography as a hobby.
Yes.
Someone who purchases expensive cameras, but still
Oh God.
still puts it as a hobby. But in photography and design, what are the parallels that you draw?
So I like to do street photography, and what I've been able to see is simple thing like waiting for the moment, not knowing what's going to happen. That has helped me a lot while doing research. That's one thing. But also one interesting thing I've learned about street photography is that over time you also start sensing when a moment is going to happen. Okay, a lot of the pictures that I've taken are this idea of a candid photograph is actually what I've realized is that it's actually not so candid. Okay, that frame that you see is a moment that in a way saw it coming a few seconds before. Whatever, consciously, unconsciously, intuitively, whatever, through experience, you see some things happening and then you're taking pictures and you know that this person is going to walk into that frame. This is how they are going to be here. This is going to be, this is going to be your frame.
Yeah.
But same thing with research. You start sensing that a moment is going to happen.
Yeah.
Right? And you prepare for it. And so a lot of it is like that, yeah.
So next question is, what is your biggest failure in design and what did you learn from it? It's a tough one.
Failure.
You wanted to do something probably, but did not do it the way it should have been done.
I've had a lot of projects fail. And not see the light of day. Lot of projects. Because they were either very ambitious by design, by intent, they were moonshot projects or,
From a personal level.
Yeah.
Like, where do you feel like, I could have done better?
Oh, lots. I mean, like I started my own company in 2007. That was a glorious disaster. Like, I mean, I call myself a been there, didn't do that entrepreneur. I burnt so much money and like burnt my fingers so badly. I said I'm much happier as an entrepreneur than an entrepreneur. That was a glorious disaster. I mean, everything that you should not do in a startup or as an entrepreneur, I did. A lot of failure.
It's very surprising. It comes from you, but I'm sure there was
A lot of disasters, a lot of failures. I did.
What was your most successful failure?
I hired people before I had any projects. Stupid stuff like that. Stupid shit. I mean, I don't even know what I was thinking, but.
Okay, got it. What is this one myth about the design industry that you would want to debunk?
One myth about the design industry. Right now, one of my biggest ones is that this big wave that has been going on in the last few years, UX UI. I want to kill that term.
Okay, thanks.
I just want to murder that term. I feel like there is this wave that has happened, especially with in the last few years, especially in India, with the startup ecosystem becoming big, with a lot of the growth of the ecosystem because of VC money and this whole hype around startups and whatnot. With that, and plus the need for a lot of this app ecosystem to grow up, and a lot of success through that. A lot of these entrepreneurs and VCs have realized the need for design.
Correct.
Through that, which is great. But unfortunately, a lot of that has got attributed to saying UX UI. And I think that's somewhere a bit of a, unfortunately, it's a bit dumbing down of design.
Why do you so?
Because of what we spoke about earlier, right? That you can't look at it through the narrow lens of saying, I just need some wireframes and I need some mockups. You're putting the cart before the horse. I mean, this is one of my favorite analogies for describing design for a non-design person is it's like cooking, right? I mean, you don't if you talk to a master chef or a person who's really good at cooking, a really good cook or a good chef is not going to think so much about the garnishing of the plate and the garnishing part of the food, of the cooking, right? The garnishing and the plating happens in the end. That's the last bit of the process. Very important, by the way, very critical. The plating is obviously very critical. I mean, I would love to see good plating done when I'm eating in a great restaurant, right? And the garnishing of it, and supremely important. I'm not saying no. But that is one part of the process, and that happens at the end. There is so much happens that happens before you get to that part of the process, in terms of thinking about the recipe, thinking about the ingredients, where you source the ingredients, how you sourced it, how those ingredients come together, how much you prototyped and tried out what comes together, how those things come together. I mean, there's so much that the chef is thinking about or the cook is thinking about before that food came together. But no one thinks about that. All you think about is that, that superficial stuff that happens at the end. And again, I'm not saying superficial is wrong or bad. I care, when I make a new Excel sheet, I first make sure that I choose the right type and I choose the right alignment, and I remove all the stupid grid lines in the Excel sheet. So I care a lot about the look of it. I'm not saying I don't care about that, but there is it's in context. That's the point I'm saying.
Param, the last question, something that we are asking every guest, and it needs to come from the heart. Okay.
Oh God.
Okay. What does product design mean to you?
It's about solving. It's about delighting a user. It's about solving a problem and delighting a user.
Yeah.
That's it. Solving something that matters to them and delighting them. I think delight would be the key emphasis. Yes.
All right. So with this, we'll wrap this up. But thank you so much, Param, for joining us. It really means a lot. We really believe that this is going to help the design community maneuver, work around, get inspired in some way or the other. Thanks so much for joining.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me over. Been a pleasure. I look forward. Thank you.
Thanks.